Thank you. And I must always start with the disclaimer because of the new legislation makes it very clear about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. It's just this is not formal advice and is there as a keynote for today. So what I'm going to be covering today is understanding the law in a very minute area relating to farming and farming industries that support farming. Not going into detail, very high level. Expectations of what's out there and what we need to do as practitioners in the industry and as farmers themselves. And certainly a lot of the work I do is directly on the ground work with the people on the ground, and certainly I'll be sharing a number of those experiences with you today. Also, what you need to do and what you should already be doing and what you need to understand going forward. So my approach today is one that often raises eyebrows, so don't be offended by that. My approach is one of common sense. And I say that deliberately because if a person says to you there is no such thing as common sense, that generally means that person doesn't have any, hasn't lived life, or just reading from textbooks. So it's a learned craft, common sense, and something that is given to you, passed down through life's experiences. So with that, I shall move on. So before we start, to make it easy for me to give a bit of context, because I believe there's a lot of practitioners here as well as other industry bodies besides farmers themselves. So just a bit of a show of hands for me as to how many have full-time casual staff in their portfolios that they manage. Not many. I thought there would have been more. Okay, very good. And contractors? People who use contractors in the field? Yep, very good. How many of you got systems in place already? That should be giving me a majority of hands, so well done. And who keeps day-to-day records of what they do, especially in the farmers at the grassroots? So I've got getting a few hands. So let's just say I've had more hands up here today than I've had at previous sessions. So thank you for that. That's a good sign that things are moving in the right direction. So in the context of farming, and the final one was about how many have done an audit on their farm. That's impressive. Very good. Well done. So understanding the law and how to make your decisions moving forward. There's the website, which should be well and truly across by now, of how to find stuff. There's been quite a bit of work done in getting information out through the various farming arms and industry to help people look at what they need to do. That will help you, guide you. And where I'm getting a lot of confusion on the ground is, and certainly speaking with different farmers across WA, that's from the guys in the Pilbara region all the way down to the farmers in Esperance, is the misunderstanding. And some of the people that have been out there providing advice are actually using mining type regulations rather than what's applicable to agriculture. So I just wanted to stress this point here that the farming sits in the general regulations area and not under mining and not under petroleum. Some of the farmers that I've been asked to go and speak to, let's just say, have been paying tens of thousands of dollars, and it's got no relevance because they don't even understand it, and it's not relevant to their farm. It's all mining. So I'd ask you to reflect on what you're doing and making sure it's relevant to the legislation that you fit into. So we all have duties in life, and the expectations, and in part, I'm just sort of highlighting the key ones that I felt were most relevant to farming and ones that I pick up from all my road trips, is that you need to identify reasonable and foreseeable hazards. And sadly, that gets misinterpreted by some people out there, that they go and look for problems and make problems that actually don't exist. So it's about, every farmer runs their farm in their own right and in their way that they've done for generations. And what we're trying to do is bring safety into that process of generational change. And so that is a challenge in itself when you've got a long-standing culture of 4 and 5 generational farms where you've learnt from your parents and their parents and so on, and it's about trying to get keep the good things, but the things that are dangerous, trying to get them out. So I encourage people to look at their farm and how they run their farm in its own context, not about what the neighbour's doing or anyone else is doing, but look at your risks and identify what is a reasonable and foreseeable hazard in your farm and your farming context. And it's emphasised throughout legislation that it all relates to what so far is reasonably practicable. So don't create problems that don't exist, is what I'm saying to you. And I see a lot of that happening, and then that leads to other problems in running your farm. So just deal with what you do day to day and do it in a safe manner, and everything should flow smoothly. The next one is getting people to understand. This is one of the ones that I've found over time has been quite challenging for people to understand the hierarchy of control. And there's a myth that you can eliminate every hazard out there on the farm or even in industry. And I believe you me, I work in mining as well as agriculture. But I can assure you that it's impossible to eliminate everything all of the time. So the idea of the hierarchy of control for the farming community is to have a look at it and then work your way down through it, about being, is there something we can change with our business practice to make it safer in what we do, or even smarter. And what I've seen in a number of circumstances is when we've had this discussion about the hierarchy of control and getting the certain generations to understand what it all means, is it's actually resulted in them running their farm more efficiently by going through this risk assessment process, funnily enough. And so they physically changed the way they've done something. So they haven't been able to eliminate the hazard, but they've gone down and replaced a particular item, or had it repaired with an addition to make it safer. And then also in some cases, we've actually removed people from certain environments that were just too risky, and there was common, small accidents. And as we all know, when you start having little accidents, eventually it leads to a bigger accident. So it's been quite positive to see in some areas that they've changed their work practices to remove people from those higher levels of risk. So I've already spoken about the engineering of the hazards coming out and then changing the way people work. Now, this has been the administrative controls, which is about culture to me. That has been the biggest challenge that I'm coming across in the industry, is because people are set in their ways. And there's some people in life that don't like to change because they find changes just not in their demeanour, and they resist change at all opportunities as such. But when I say to those people is embrace change for the good and the right reasons, and you'll go far, and it actually ends up creating naturally a nice, safe work environment for everybody. So if you go through the process in the context of how you farm and how you behave, and you change your culture, 90% of the issues we've got out there is a culture. And if we can change the culture, we'll change the outcome. So this is just a bit of what I call throwing the balls and juggling the balls up in the sky. So it's not specific to everything and anything, it's very generic. But certainly from my experiences, getting people to understand the expectations, is this has been one of the most successful understandings for a lot of farmers, for me, is about getting their head around about the maintenance of controls, reviewing the control measures, which is what they do every day, reviewing what they do, how they do it, can they improve it, putting employees on training courses. And so my little chart that you see up there on the board is basically, as a farmer, trying to juggle the balls around me all the time. But in a sense, if you look at it, it's actually, there's a continual cycle of see, play, do, change, and back there you go again, and you start the cycle again. So I find this quite a handy little a diagram to share with farmers, that it's not hard. And a lot of guys are actually doing this anyway, but just don't realise they are doing it. So as part of a project I did last year for a farming community, was to look at what's out there. And certainly for the farming industry, it's just endless what's out there in the sense of WorkSafe programs. And I had trying to find out how many systems were out there. Well, they're endless and they're global, and especially when you go online, there's just so many. But I say to everybody, just because it looks good doesn't mean it suits you. And in a lot of farmers, especially when farms that don't actually employ too many people, or maybe even just one or two, you actually don't need a fadangled system. You can actually, use your own spreadsheets and just change the culture of what you're doing, and you'll be meeting the requirements of the legislation anyway. So it's about taking people on a journey. What do they offer? It's varied, and again, I ask you to look at it in the context of how you farm, not how your neighbour farms, but how you farm. I seem to get a lot of people saying, well, old Joe Bloggs is doing this. I said, yeah, but that's him, that's not you. Focus on you. And that's the biggest challenge. So be proud of who you are, what you do, and how you do it, but let's do it in a safe way. And the last one is, where do I start? Well, the first thing that I say to the people I deal with is, let's come on farm and let's do a farm safety audit. We'll go for a bit of a walk around, we'll go for a drive around, and just by having those conversations, we get to see where they're at, and it's quite amazing where some people are at. So to give you a bit of a snapshot, and when I say snapshot, this is just a few of the more common systems that I've seen, but then there's some of them on there that are absolutely not relevant to farming at all. So hence why it's only a very short snapshot. And certainly from some of the visits I've done around to farms, there's other systems, so like the Safe Ag system out there, because some people like apps, and the younger generation want everything on an app. And we all know that there's some of us who aren't that technologically advanced and don't even have an email address. So how are these apps going to work? And this is what I say about making things relevant to who you are, what you are, and how you do your business. And it doesn't matter whether you're a farmer or an industry providing services to a farmer. You need to be, that approach needs to be consistent. And this is just another one. So what's coming, just in the context of the research I did, and just what's certainly coming, and Holly's going to be talking later today, so I won't steal the thunder there. With Safe Farms WA, I've been doing some wonderful work in developing something that may be handy for some people, and certainly their existing systems suit quite a few farms that I've been on and certainly use them. So there, and then some people want an all-encompassing system that manages not only their day-to-day farm, but all their technologies, their monitoring systems and everything else. And certainly one that we've come across in recent times is one from Access Tech. He is a farming family, funnily enough, who are the founders of them, and they're based here in WA. They're not recommendations, just what's out there. So what do you need to do and where to go from here. So as a farmer, you need to commit to the journey. And certainly I know when the legislation came out, and sadly a couple of the farm visits I've done, I've ended up being abused for the legislation that I am not responsible for, but I'm used to that. But it's about, again, getting people to commit to that journey, and by getting me out, I suppose they've started that journey. So I know it's a bit confronting, getting abused, but it's a good thing, because they're unloading that psychological pressures that have been stewing in their stomachs, and they've got it out. And I don't care, I'm a big fella, I've got plenty of cushioning, so it's all good. So, but do commit to that journey. It's worthwhile. Change culture is certainly in the farming community. There's a lot of people set in their ways. Now, my dad was a classic of that. I don't want to deal with this BS, not relevant to me, don't have the time, and that's a common thing I get on farms. I just don't have the time, I'm time poor. Well, welcome to life. I'm time poor. Everyone in this room, I can guarantee you, you're all time poor in some way, shape or form. That's life. What we need to do is be smart about what we do and how we do it, and that is changing our culture. So psychologically, this is where certainly speaking with some other colleagues over east in this psychological space about how do we change culture. Well, if you start by having a conversation, and especially with those that are set in their way, you'll over time get them feeling relaxed to open up and say what's in here out. Because if someone's bottling it in, that affects their psychological state throughout the day that they're working. So the consequence of that is they might have an accident. So start your toolbox meetings. If you don't want to call them a toolbox meeting, fine, but just start with a gathering of your workers, if you've got them, and have a conversation about what's going on, what are we doing, why are we doing it, and where we're heading. And then progressively expand that, and then get them to give you ideas about what it is they want to address. And over time, you'll change the culture, because if you make your culture in your work environment happy, engaging, and fun, guess what happens? Your productivity goes like this. And certainly, so there's been very clear evidence of that, and I've certainly experienced that. I've gone on to farms where from the time I walk on, the culture is just very happy, everything's clean and in its place, and you come away so energised and happy, whereas other places you drive in the driveway and there's shit everywhere and gear laying down, and you've got to drive around staff, and you psychologically, for me, it's pulling me down. So if you can imagine you're a worker on that place, what it means to you as a worker, you'd be going, oh my God, So it doesn't create a good culture, does it? So what we all do, and it might not be relevant to safety, but it relates to culture that improves safety. So everything's intertwined, whether we like it or not. So work on changing your culture. And the main place of where the culture starts is with the person at the top, the decision makers at the top. If they're not engaged, and certainly there's been a couple of properties where I've gone on where the owner's saying, I'm just doing this to tick the effing box and I want to get this done and out the door. I said, mate, it's not going to work if that's your attitude. You've got to change your attitude, okay? So rather than talking to all the workers, I focused my energy on those individuals at the very top, and it took months, but I got them around. Then we started going down the chain. Because if the top's not engaged, well, we're wasting our time, aren't we? So you then need to review everything you're doing and how you're doing it. And is there a better way to do what we do? And that includes making it fun, but safe, okay? See if there's a way that you can be innovative. And certainly a great thing that seems to be getting great momentum is there's a few farmers that are starting to now take their workers away for a day or two, for a weekend away, and they have a bit of a workshop whilst they're away, having a bit of a time out from the farm. And I'm seeing in those environments, I'm actually seeing there's a good cultural change, and their productivity, talking to the owners, has been slowly going up and up, because they just do it once a year, but it means the workers feel engaged with what's going on in the day-to-day running of that farm. So yes, it's if you've got a good culture, you've got high productivity. They are linked. Keeping records, the bane in every farmer's life. Why do I need to keep records? I told him the other day, I said, well, show me. He was being an idiot. I said, yeah, well, show me where you recorded that. Oh, I don't have time for that. I said, yeah, but if he has an accident tomorrow, where's the record that you've told him not to be an idiot? So you've got to do the right thing by them. So, a lot of farmers are, using WhatsApp. You've got your iPhones that have got the little note section in it, just make a note. And every farmer that I know actually runs a diary. I says, so make a diary note. Oh, well, I suppose I could do that. Some of them saying, oh, no, don't have time to do that. I said, well, you've got to keep records, because if something happens, you need to be able to demonstrate what you've done. And that relates to documentation of inducting people, showing them the safe way to do it. If you're an industry where you've got specific processes on a production line that things need to be done in a certain way, you can't bring Joe Bog in as a new employee and say, right, just that's where you stand and you've got to do that job. You've actually got to take them through that whole process in detail and induct them into that. And that's the same in farming. You can't say just jump on the paddock and plough the paddock. Well, which plough, scarifier device do I use? How do I use it? How's all this electronics in the cab work? You've got to actually take them through that. Okay, so that is capturing the documentation of that you've done that is critical for your survival down the line if something ever goes wrong. Your business practices, once again, I've covered that, but it's about making sure that what you're doing is keeping everyone as safe as is reasonably practicable at all times, and doing your business and running your business in a way that's most efficient and effective for what you do in your context. So where do we start? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Understanding that this process never ends. As my juggling ball says, it's continual and never ends. So it's a good idea that maybe once or twice in a farming context that you have at least 2 sessions a year where you review everything as a minimum, say pre-harvest, pre-seeding, get everyone together and saying, well, this is what we're thinking of doing throughout the seeding program this year. There's going to be some people dedicated in just driving the tractors, doing the seeding, other people do the refueling, the getting the seeds, the spraying and all that. And by having everyone together at the same time in the same place means psychologically they're all on the same page. So that will help your efficiency, so subconsciously they are prepared for what is coming. So, what do we need to understand as farmers and in the farming context? What WorkSafe and the law expects of us all, and by you attending here online and also in person today, she's showing that commitment that you're taking this matter serious, which is really good to see, almost a full room, and also the large numbers we have online today. So just be aware that in the farming context, I've previously highlighted the areas you need to focus on and get your head around. It's not hard. And ironically, when I've done some farm audits, most of the farmers are already doing what is required, but they're just not understanding that the legislation here is what they're actually doing here. They just need to bring them together and document it, change their processes and their behaviours, and they're there. So it's not this big ogre out there. It's actually a journey, okay? The different parts of law that apply to you, and as I say, you're not mining, you're not petroleum, you're fit into the general area. So if you have somebody there trying to sell you something, and it's very complicated and long-winded, just think, let a little red flag go up here and look elsewhere is what I would suggest. How often do you need to review your farming practices? Well, it's a never-ending cycle, and what you need to know is this never ends. So by starting off with a farm audit, you'll get yourself on the right trajectory. The WorkSafe guys are really easy to talk to. Pick up the phone, have a conversation, or if you use a consultant or as such, pick up the phone and have a chat with them, and they'll work with you to get you through. Farmers quite often ask me, is there any exemptions? That's a common one. How do I get around this? Is there anything that I can... I said, no, mate, it's not... There's no such thing as exemptions for somebody's safety, because we're here to all go home at night at the end of the day. So I say to people, you've just got to start this journey, and some of them it's very challenging, but at least they're taking the first step. I suppose you can buy something off the shelf, but if you do, you're exposing yourself immensely. Because if you buy something off the shelf and you don't understand what's in there, so if I came up to you and you bought something off the shelf, which a farmer has done to me, he said, oh, look at this, I've got this beautiful folder here, he pulls it out, I just randomly opened a page and I read it and I said, oh, what do you do here in this regards to this particular item? And he says, I don't know, I don't do that on my farm. I said, so why is it in your manual that you've paid 20 grand for? Oh, really? I said, I suggest you go and use this to light your fire and start afresh. So that does happen. So the answer to the question is, no, you can't buy anything off the shelf, because if you're not engaged in the journey, you're not going to make a difference and make a change. You need to understand it, because if something goes wrong and you're the PCBU, you need to understand the whole from start to finish and how it all works in between. Okay? Pulling this thing off a shelf is not going to help you at all. So with that, it's a very brief and broad overview. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to talk. And I'm going to be here all day to ask questions around, but also on the panel later on today. So thank you one and all.
Thanks, Dave.
Cheers.
I will just hold you here for a moment, because there are a couple of questions that have come in while you've been doing your presentation. So we might just see if we can, we've got a couple of minutes, so we can hit a couple of those off now. And I'm going to ask the second last one that came in because it got upvoted. Dave, what in your view is the best way to engage with farmers?
Ooh, that is a really, really difficult question, because every farmer is different, okay? There is no square box that all farmers fit into. And the best way to engage with a farmer is by actually going and having a face-to-face with them and starting a conversation with them about their farm and them as an individual, because you'd be amazed at what they share with you, but that also breaks down their fear of perception of what they need to do, and it generates a conversation. So I find that is the best way to start and get the wedge in the door, as I call it.
Terrific, thank you. You mentioned early on in your presentation about creating problems when you're looking for them. Somebody has asked, can you give any examples of where people have identified problems that maybe weren't there previously?
It's what I saw, and I won't give specific details. I don't like doing that because it's not fair on individuals. But there was a circumstance where there was an employee that had a mindset that he wanted to create problems. So that person went into this workshop environment and said, that's a problem and this is a problem, and it wasn't really a problem in regards to how they were working at the day. So he wanted to create a problem just for the sake of creating a problem. I'm sorry I'm not articulating that too well, but there are individuals that use this legislation to attack an employer, okay? And so you'll have people that will go in and create problems when they're not really a problem. And that, as an employer, is a real challenge to break that culture of that individual. And the only way you're going to do that is by making cultural changes, by tackling the psychological issues of that person and trying to get them to look at things differently. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go into too much detail there.
That's fine. Look, Dave, how positive do you feel that the inquiry into the agricultural industry will result in improved safety in the industry?
I'm getting mixed reviews on that. Certainly, it's a step in the right direction, and I'm going to use it's a journey because a lot of farmers still to this day are not very, receptive to change. And that's this issue that is causing the reactions that I get in a negative context. But in saying that, I've met a number of people who are very positive about the inquiry has actually brought it to the forefront. So I think it was a great first step to get it out there in the community. What I see as a big problem is social media and the media in general manipulating good intent to create sensationalism. And I deal with the media on a weekly and almost daily basis in the other role that I do. And they are constantly trying to manipulate things to make it sensationalised. And we see that a lot in the fire scenario. And I was just dealing with the Origin fire scenario over the last 24 hours. And I saw it there. Sensationalism to create fear. Okay, and this WorkSafe journey that we're on here is one where the media has created a fear campaign of you're going to jail, you're going to jail, you're going to jail, and that's what the Department of WorkSafe is all about, is putting people in jail, when in actual fact it's not what they're about. They're here to help us get us to rethink about what we do and how we do it, so everyone goes home at night. And that's what I hate about social media and the general media as such, is they are using the rules to create sensationalism to sell papers.
Thank you, Dave. Now, we do have a couple more questions, but we've run out of time for this session, so we'll hold those over and we'll put those to you potentially during the panel presentation this afternoon. But thank you very much, Dave Gossage.
No, thank you.